And we welcome you back to Newsmax Now. Right now, the NTSB says it still is not sure exactly what caused that train to derail last night in Philadelphia. They are launching a wide-scale investigation into the accident. That train ran carrying more than 200 passengers and crew members. When it came off the tracks, it was on its way from New York, I should say, to Washington, D.C. And joining us now to take a closer look at this is Deborah Hersman. She's the president and CEO of the National Safety Council and a former chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. Deborah, it's good to have you with us.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to clarify again, was it going from, I thought it was going from D.C. to New York and then crashed right outside of Philly. But regardless, in your experience, we were talking about that this same stretch of track, that there was a similar accident that happened back in the 1940s. What do you think could have caused this? I know we're just speculating right now. Investigators are out there on the scene. They're examining that black box that John mentioned earlier that they have now. What do you think?
So there is a northbound train here, and we know that they departed Philadelphia. I think that the investigators are going to be really looking very closely during these daylight hours. They're going to be really locking down the evidence, the perishable evidence. They want to make sure that they have downloading those recorders, documenting the scene, and really doing the things that they need to do to clear up that track because it's such a busy corridor. They want to get it back in service.
Well, Deborah, you of course have this experience as not only a board member of the NTSB, being on the ground investigating these type of crashes, but also as the former chairman of the NTSB. We're hearing from reports that speed is being closely examined here. Does that mean that it may have been conductor or engineer error going too fast, or potentially that the tracks could no longer handle the normal speed at which the train is supposed to travel on these tracks?
So generally what you see is there are going to be speed restrictions. Track is going to be rated to a certain speed. On the Northeast Corridor, this is actually a high-speed corridor, but there will be sections where there will be lower speeds. Curves are one area where there might be a lower speed. And so when they're looking at speed as a factor, they will be looking at what's the optimal speed or what's the speed limit and how is the train operating.
Deborah, what are investigators going to be doing right now? We've seen aerial footage of them on the scene. What will they be examining right now? Take us through the process, if you will.
Sure. They typically have a number of groups of specialists, and so you've got specialists who are railroad engineers. They've got experience operating trains. They're going to be doing things like gathering up the records, the training records, conducting interviews with the crew. You've got track specialists. They know exactly what the track should look like, and they're trying to identify the point of derailment where that train left the tracks, and so what might have precipitated that. They're going to be looking at the condition of the rail bed, the tracks themselves to see if the rail might have been worn out or if there was anything going on there. And then you've got mechanical teams that are going to look at the cars, they're going to look at the wheel sets, they're going to look at bluing of the brake shoes. There's all sorts of forensic work that's going to go on really in these first 48 hours of the investigation.
And in terms of room for human error in these types of situations, we were just showing pictures of the wreckage there. There are the signals which indicate, I guess, speed or whether or not a train can proceed through the area. Are those operated by humans? Could that have been a contributing factor in this crash?
So certainly they'll be looking at the signals. They can test those signals. There's memory that allows them to take a look at what the signal positions were, or what the lights were displaying. You've got dispatchers that are in a centralized location. They're not going to be right there by the tracks. They're going to be in a secure location where they're lining all of the switches and setting the tracks for which trains are going to be operating in which directions, where they're going to meet and pass. All of these things will be looked at. They're going to be interviewing an awful lot of people and collecting records in the very early hours.
Deborah, let's talk about infrastructure, if we can, for a moment. We've heard several people go on television and say that some of these Amtrak trains appear to look exactly the same as they did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. How much of a factor do you think that will play into this investigation?
Railroading is a very capital intensive industry. You've got to really invest in the infrastructure, and that means for the Amtrak trains on the Northeast Corridor, you've got catenary, the overhead electrical systems that you've got to support. You've got track. This is highly traveled trains. You've got more passenger trains coming through here, not just intercity Amtrak trains, but also commuter trains. And so there is a lot of work that has to be done. And you know, the cars and the trains may look similar to what they looked like 10 or 15 years ago, but that's not that different than the way our cars look or the way airplanes look or boats look. And so it's important to maintain them, it's important to inspect them, and it's important to invest, not as much as what they look like.
All right, we know more attention will be paid to that following
Right.
the 6 deaths in this case and the hundreds injured. Debbie Hersman, thanks so much for being with us. President and CEO of the National Safety Council and former chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. More coming up here on Newsmax Now. We're going to have the first part of our exclusive interview with Dick Morris talking about the dysfunction going on in the Democratic Party, specifically between the president and the leadership of Democrats in Senate.
Should be interesting. Always good to hear from Dick.